this video, I'm going to go through how to identify the different species within Felidae. So in the cat family, we're going to cover our three native species, so the puma color, puma/cougar/mountain lion, whatever you want to call it. Lynx rufus, the bobcat, lynx canadensis, the Canada lynx, and we're also going to throw in the domestic cat, which should be pretty easy for you to identify. So in looking at our cats, the first thing we can do to separate out the bobcat and lynx skulls from the puma and domestic cat skulls is counting the number of teeth. So here it says the dental formula of the mountain lion is in your book. There are 30 total teeth versus 28 of the lynx. The key difference there being here on the puma, there's a tiny, tiny, tiny little premolar just behind the canine. And if you look at the bobcat or the lynx, that's gone. There's no little tiny tooth there. If you look at the domestic cat, it also has that very small premolar. So even without measuring the size, you can tell a domestic cat from a bobcat skull based on whether or not that little tooth is present. Now these two skulls have the same dental formula, so how do you tell a puma from a domestic cat? Well, I really hope you can, because this one is massive and this one is much smaller. I'm not even going to bother saying exact measurements because you should be able to recognize, if we give you a measurement, you should know that this is a lot bigger than this one. I will also point out that we have domestic cat skin here. I'm sure everyone knows what a domestic cat looks like. As you know, they come in different colors. And then back here, we have a puma skin, which you shouldn't confuse with the bobcat and the lynx because the tail is so much longer. And the body is bigger. Even if you have a young puma, you won't confuse it because of the tail. So what is more confusing is distinguishing the bobcat from the lynx. If we look at the skull, I mentioned that the skulls have the same dental formula, and they also overlap in size. So you can't say that, you can't use a certain measurement cutoff to say what is a bobcat versus what is a lynx. Now there are two things listed in your key of how to distinguish the skulls. One of them is the shape of the pre-sphenoid, which there's a picture of on page 69. So here, we're talking about this bone right there. And here, in the Canada lynx, it says that this bone is more flask-shaped versus narrower in the bobcat. However, that's not my favorite trick that I want to look at. So I will emphasize instead looking at these two foramina in the back. So we have the atrobula here, we have the occipital condyles here. I'm talking about these two holes. And what you can see is on this Canada lynx, they're very clearly separated. I think of this as the Canada lynx, lynx canadensis, there's that border between the US and Canada. So separate countries, separate holes. Versus lynx rufus, the two holes are kind of sunk in together. So you can still see two holes, but one is kind of tucked inside the other, and they're not as clearly separated as they are in the lynx. And that is the main way that that I distinguish the bobcat and lynx skulls. So to reiterate, you can use the dental formula looking for this premolar in particular to separate out puma and domestic cat from lynx and bobcat, and then lynx and bobcat, you can use the pre-sphenoid shape, or I prefer to use whether or not these two foramina are kind of distinctly separate, or whether they are more confluent, as this key says. Now looking at the lynx and the bobcat skins, the coloration might be a little different, but is not super consistent, except we can look at the coloration of the tail. So if we're looking at lynx canadensis, the tip of the tail is black all the way around. Versus, if we look at the bobcat, there's black on top of the tail, but underneath at the tip, it's white. So regardless of what else is happening with the coloration, this is consistent. The other way to tell apart the skins is using measurements. You may recall, first week of lab, I guess 2 weeks ago, we mentioned external body measurements. So if you have 4 numbers like this on the museum specimen, these were taken of the animal before it was prepared as a museum specimen. And it gives you the total length, the tail length, the hind foot length, and the ear length. If we're comparing the lynx and the bobcat, we want to look at the tail length and the hind foot length. For the lynx, the tail length will be less than 1/2 of the hind foot length. So here, if I take 120 divided by 280, that's 43%, less than 50%, less than half. It has a relatively small tail and long hind foot. If we look at the bobcat, and we take the tail length, 95, divided by the hind foot length, 130, that's 73%. So this has a relatively longer tail and shorter hind foot. So that, together with the tail, are the 2 ways that you can tell apart the skins of your lynx and bobcat.